in a way that is today literally inconceivable. The media had contrived to hide the fact of the president's polio from the electorate. Photographs always showed FDR seated or standing unaided. But that day, invited by Winston Churchill to join him on the decks of HMS Prince of Wales off Newfoundland, FDR was determined literally to rise to the occasion. Leaning heavily on a cane, supported on one side by his son and on the other by a naval officer, he made his slow way across the swaying decks, while the band of HMS Prince of Wales struck up the Stars and Stripes forever. And what followed was the most extraordinary demonstration of what binds the English-speaking peoples together. Churchill knew that it was not enough to appeal to the president as one democratic leader to another. He had to show that deeper consanguinity of values, that deeper affinity of culture upon which the union of English-speaking peoples rested. It happened to be a Sunday morning, and the crews of the two vessels, the USS Augusta, which had carried Roosevelt, and HMS Prince of Wales, were paraded for a joint religious service. Churchill had chosen every detail personally and meticulously, down to the hymns, down to the reading that the chaplain gave from the pulpit. It came from Joshua 1. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage. Afterwards, exultantly, Churchill burst out to an aid, the same language, the same hymns, the same ideals. And when Churchill spoke of the same ideals, he was not making some bland generalization about being the good guys. Think of the world as it stood in August 1941. Constitutional freedom was confined to the Anglosphere, to the community of free English-speaking peoples. The whole of the Eurasian landmass, from Seoul and Vladivostok to Brest and Lisbon, was under one form or another of authoritarianism. The easiest temptation to give into, my friends, is to take things for granted, to become blasé about the unique privileges we've been born with. We can so easily fall into the error of assuming that freedom and free contract, that regular elections and uncensored newspapers, that jury trials and habeas corpus and equality between men and women, that these things are somehow the natural condition of an advanced society. That every country will get there when it becomes educated enough and wealthy enough. But history tells a very different story. Those precepts were overwhelmingly developed in the language in which you're listening to these words. We now tend to call them Western values. Sometimes we even call them universal values. But you know what? We're being polite. The reason they became Western values, if we're blunt about it, was as a direct result of a series of military victories by the English-speaking peoples. If the Second World War or the Cold War had ended differently, they would not be universal values today. They wouldn't even be universal aspirations today. Our fathers, yours and mine, not only defended freedom in their homelands, but took the promise of liberty across the oceans. And as a result, our species has been elevated to a pinnacle of wealth and freedom and happiness that was previously unimaginable. There are many who are now quick to criticize US hegemony. But you know what? They would be a lot quicker to complain if it waned. You don't have to look too far to see some of the alternatives. We have been fortunate, blessed in the nature of our superpower. 40 million people around the world tuned in to watch your presidential inauguration. All right, it would be nice if you had another president, but still, think of the vote of confidence in your system. Can you imagine any people in any numbers tuning in to watch the proceedings of the Russian Duma or the National People's Congress in Beijing, or indeed the European Commission, God forbid? We have been lucky in the nature of our superpower. But I have to tell you, the scales are tilting. power is sliding. There are parts of this planet where prestige is a hard, almost tangible commodity. From Syria to Ukraine, we see people making the calculation that the star of the English-speaking peoples is waning, making the rational decision to cozy up to regimes that are a lot less wholesome than ours. What can we do about it? How are we to restore the leadership and the moral authority of this country? To make a rather obvious point, when you have a national debt of $17 trillion, you have to pick your fights pretty carefully. You don't have the luxury of intervening everywhere. You're not in a position to offer succor to every stricken nation, to deploy troops in every war zone. So what are we to do to restore the example, the influence, the authority, the legitimacy of your system? Well, if we're not going to be sending Apaches to the level sands of Syria, if we're not going to be sending Humvees to the broad wheat fields of Ukraine, how to restore your authority? By restoring order and sanity to the federal budget. When your debt touches $17 trillion, that becomes a question of national security. The interest that you are paying simply on that portion of your debt owned by the Chinese government is now equivalent to 1/3 of the entire Chinese defense budget, 1/2 of the Russian defense budget. My friends, when we're talking about numbers on that scale, it's not just your problem anymore. It becomes a problem for the Western world in general. The problem may be global, but the solution has to come from you. Being a US citizen carries responsibilities. And chief among those responsibilities is that when you see your politicians going astray, it is for you to correct them or to replace them. If you vote for candidates whose first instinct in any crisis is to snatch at more laws and more legal powers, don't complain when your country becomes less free. If you vote for candidates who think that it's the government's responsibility to provide health care, don't complain when your hospitals are as badly run as everything else run by the state. If you vote for candidates who promise to give you somebody else's money, don't complain when those candidates give your money to someone else or indeed to themselves. You might ask, why is a British Conservative coming to CPAC and talking about domestic US politics? I'll answer frankly, my friends. No English speaker can be indifferent to the fortunes of this republic. We've been through too much together. You may be a separate country, but you're not to us a foreign country. We're family. Joint heirs to a common inheritance.